Boris Johnson is going to ask the House to vote on a general election on Monday. Do you think you're going to get the right number of MPs to put it through?
Well, look, I hope so. But as you've just said, we don't even at this point know what Jeremy Corbyn is going to do. And just think about that for a second. It's astounding. You know, he's already turned down the opportunity for a general election once. He's turned it down again. And this will be the third time. And if he turns this down, this is the first time in the history of our government that the opposition, which claims to be, because they're the opposition, they claim to be better than the government, are turning down the opportunity to face the people.
But you know why they're turning it down. What they
because
want...
they don't know what they want.
No. What they want is they want to be assured that no deal is taken off the table, and they want to understand how long the extension is going to be that we get from Europe. If Boris Johnson can confirm that no deal is taken off the table and the extension is right, they will go for it. Can you do that? Can you tell us that no deal will be taken off the table?
Well, I'll say this. First of all, we have done everything possible to leave the EU on October the 31st. Remember, everyone said you couldn't get a deal. We did. We prepared for no deal just in case. But despite that, because of the actions of Parliament and Jeremy Corbyn in particular, there is now, sadly, likely to be further delay. Now, you're right. We don't know exactly how long that delay will be. But given that Parliament requested a 3-month delay, let's assume that that's probably the most likely outcome. But we'll see. Now, if we do get that 3-month delay, against our wishes, it's something that Jeremy Corbyn has asked for, then he should be agreeable to this general election. And if he doesn't agree to the general election, there can only be one answer. He doesn't want to face the electorate. He wants to keep this zombie parliament there, damaging the interests of British people, not just delivering on Brexit, but failing to deliver on so much more.
Well, I'm sure he would take issue that that is his reason, but I understand why you would say that. Some people are suggesting that calling for this election and attaching to it the deal for the timetable, that they can get more time, is a brilliant way to distract from the fact that the Prime Minister said he would die in a ditch if we didn't leave by October the 31st. No one is thinking about that, are they? They're just looking at Labour now, not going for an election. It's very clever. Is that the intention?
Well, you're thinking about it. That's why you asked me the question. But we've done everything we can to leave on the 31st. And again, people said we wouldn't be able to reopen the agreement. We wouldn't be able to get rid of the backstop. We wouldn't be able to strike a new deal. We even managed at last weekend to get the deal agreed in principle, at least in Parliament. But then Labour kiboshed it by asking for more and more delay. Delay for the second time.
You didn't necessarily need to withdraw that. You could have carried on that scrutiny of that bill because, as you rightly said, you got the bill through with a really good majority, a majority that nobody had expected. So clearly there was a feeling in the House they want to try and find a way through this. They had agreed to what Boris Johnson, the deal he'd put down. It just needed more time for scrutiny. Why did you then pause that?
Well, we don't. It's not a decision by government to pause. What happens is that when you can't get a programme motion through, that's the timetable, then it automatically pauses because there's no agreement in Parliament on the timing. And that's why then we went away, thought about what the next step should be.
And Jeremy Corbyn sat down with Boris Johnson to discuss that timetable. That was then where there was no sort of mutual understanding on what that timetable could be. If we get that sorted, then surely that scrutiny can continue.
Well, that's right. And that's exactly why the Prime Minister has made this proposal.
There's splits in Cabinet in terms of whether this is a good idea to push for this early general election. Were you one of those who thought it was a good idea?
Well, absolutely. In fact, the Prime Minister and I discussed this, the whole idea of going for an early general election, right after the votes on Saturday last week, but also have had a number of discussions.
Sorry to interrupt you, but just on that, why then did you say on Wednesday night that you still thought we could go out on the 31st and you still thought there would be a budget on November the 6th, if actually plans already been made to change that? It adds to the confusion that we can trust in what you're saying.
This is, I think everyone will agree that this is a very fast-moving situation. What we've seen just in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think, is pretty much unprecedented for our politics. Now, it is, if Jeremy Corbyn still, when I referred to earlier this week, if he still wanted to go for the 31st, we could have done that. But clearly, he's not interested in that. But also have some kind of deadline, because if we don't have a deadline, and the deadline in this case is the dissolution of Parliament on the 6th of November, which would be necessary for a general election on the 12th of December, that would focus minds, and it would mean that there couldn't be any further dither and delay, because at every opportunity, when Jeremy Corbyn sees dither and delay, he goes for it.
Chancellor, do you understand the irony of what you're describing? Because, of course, you just said this is a very fast-moving situation, unprecedented times. But, of course, we're 3.5 years on from the referendum,
right.
and we are no closer, really, to establishing what is going to happen. So it might feel fast-paced to you, but from the outside, for the public, everyone is so fed up and frustrated because it is just mired down in argument and conflict and refusal to find the compromise.
I completely understand that, and you're right. You speak to people on the doorstep, and especially when you get outside of Westminster, and they will all tell you, no matter how they voted in the referendum, let's just get it done. And of course, the vast majority of people want to do that with a deal. That's why it was amazing and great that we struck this deal that everyone said that we couldn't. A deal that gives us a very smooth exit from the EU, keeps us as one of the strongest economies in the world. But yet, despite this, Jeremy Corbyn has still turned down the opportunity to take that.
One of the things that the other side that's dithering and delaying in your view, and they say just reasonable scrutiny in their view, one of the things they say that would be helpful is if you publish those economic impact assessments, so they had clarity on this deal, the impact of this deal.
Well, and we discussed this a bit in Parliament yesterday.
Yeah.
You're right, MPs do ask for the impact assessment. And what I said yesterday in Parliament was this deal is the withdrawal agreement. It is the terms of our withdrawal from the EU. So things like citizens' rights, the budget agreement, the situation of Northern Ireland. And we have published an impact assessment. It was done on the day the bill itself was published. And you know what? There are many MPs, when you say that, they look completely surprised. They haven't even bothered to see what the government has published.
Well, that might be the case, but also they might think that actually there are differences in this deal, and also that was a while ago you published it, and as you say, things are fast-moving. It might be worth looking at it again. Have you not done a more recent one? And if you have done one, what are you afraid of by just showing it?
No, well, actually, there's been so much confusion around this in Parliament, and sometimes I wonder whether, from certain parliamentarians, it's deliberate, because some of them are not actually interested in any kind of analysis. They just want to deny the will of the people, so they just ask for things again and again. The analysis I'm referring to, the impact assessment of this withdrawal agreement that's in front of Parliament, was just published a few days ago. It was published, a detailed assessment, just a few days ago. Now, in terms of the future economic partnership, the deep sort of free trade agreement that we're going to get with the EU, that both sides want, the EU and the UK, I'm very confident about that. But when that happens, and when it comes to Parliament, there will be further debates. Parliament will have to vote on it, and at that time we can publish lots more information. But the impact assessment of this withdrawal agreement, it has been published, and some parliamentarians just haven't taken notice of it. Others would have, but there are also some that ask for all sorts of assessments because they actually are just looking for more dither and delay.
What will you do if you don't get this through, if you don't get the votes for a general election? What next?
We're going to keep trying for a general election. I mean, you're right. If Jeremy Corbyn keeps his word, so if Parliament's request for an extension is acceded to by the EU, and it is a 3-month extension, that's what Parliament's asked for. It's not what I wanted to see. And if there was going to be one, I'd much rather have a shorter one. But if it happens, if Jeremy Corbyn keeps his word, he will have no choice but to vote for a general election on Monday when we bring forward the vote.
There's been suggestions that you could try things like, for instance, Boris Johnson could resign, he could step down and put Jeremy Corbyn in and then call a motion of confidence against Jeremy Corbyn. All sorts of shenanigans could begin. Are you looking at things like that?
We're not. We've thought long and hard about how can we get a general election, and you know, it wasn't that long ago that in Parliament, if you didn't have a majority, so you didn't have confidence of the House, it automatically leads to a general election. You could have a vote and maybe with a simpler majority get a general election. But as you said, I think a moment ago in your own programme, that you need a supermajority, at least 2/3 of Parliament. And that isn't very helpful in this situation, but that's the way it is, and that's why Jeremy Corbyn has to support this call for a general election.
So you'll keep pushing and not put any other bills. You'll effectively go on strike. People are talking about kind of zombie parliament. So none of the work that's needed on the NHS or in other areas will take place. You'll just keep pushing for that.
Well, the work on the people's priorities, and NHS is absolutely one of those. You know, on getting more police onto the streets, on working with our schools and our fantastic teachers, all of that work continues, and that's why that's been a huge focus of ours. My first spending round was very much about those priorities. That work, of course, continues, and it's partly because of our passion for the people's priorities. We need to have this general election. We just can't have this zombie parliament. I would have wanted to get a budget done. The reason I can't do a budget is because we're now going to have this election, which is the right thing to do. But Jeremy Corbyn is stopping the ordinary business in Parliament that should be taking place, as well as stopping Brexit.
There are some practical problems as well, aren't there? Because I think the Association of Electoral Administrators have said if you call this election and it's agreed to, you get that supermajority, the 2/3, for the 12th of December. There are many polling stations that have already got their Christmas bookings in. There are nativities, there are Christmas carol concerts, all those things that happen in those public halls. I mean, in practical terms, turning this around this quickly and at that time of year isn't easy, is it?
Look, it's not easy. It's far from ideal having a December election. I think everyone would accept that. But right now, and here and now for our country, it is important that we have a functioning Parliament. This is a zombie Parliament. It is completely dysfunctional. It is not only stopping Brexit, but it is stopping so much else that should be going on in our country. And I think that when we think about the country's interests, it is good for everyone that we have an election. The British people decide who should govern them. They get a clear choice between Conservatives that will deliver Brexit, back our economy, back the people's priorities, or a Labour government that will crash our economy and bring more dither and delay.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there, but the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sajid Javid, thank you for joining us.